Eso no fue una exageración. Era la simple verdad. Mi esposa infiel se sentó al otro lado de la mesa de conferencias con un traje color crema a medida, luciendo más tranquila de lo que la había visto en años. A su lado estaba sentado su abogado, con una pila de carpetas ordenadas cuidadosamente frente a él. Detrás de ella, sus padres se susurraban entre sí con sonrisas apenas disimuladas. Su hermano se recostó en su silla, con los brazos cruzados, ya disfrutando de lo que pensó que sería mi ejecución pública. Mi esposa lo quería todo. La casa que había pasado 12 años renovando habitación por habitación, el negocio que había construido desde una computadora portátil y una mesa plegable en nuestro garaje, incluso la custodia total de nuestros 2 hijos. Las acusaciones en sus documentos me pintaban como un esposo distraído y un padre ausente. Convenientemente, omitieron su romance con un alto ejecutivo de uno de nuestros competidores, una relación que había ocultado durante casi un año. Mi estómago se retorció mientras escuchaba a su abogado repetir esas afirmaciones. Entonces mi padre, sentado tranquilamente a mi lado, se inclinó más cerca. No parecía enojado, no parecía preocupado. Él simplemente susurró, «Dale todo». Me volví hacia él, convencido de que había oído mal. ¿La casa? ¿La empresa? ¿Los niños? ¿Todo? Su expresión nunca cambió. «Confía en mí», dijo. Al otro lado de la habitación, la familia de mi esposa ya estaba celebrando con los ojos. Esperaban una pelea. Esperaban que mendigara, discutiera y perdiera. En cambio, asentí lentamente. Y por primera vez esa mañana, vi parpadear una confusión genuina en el rostro de mi esposa. Porque mientras todos los demás creían que el divorcio terminaba ese día, la verdadera historia apenas comenzaba. Mi nombre es Daniel Mercer, y durante la mayor parte de mi vida, la gente confundió la tranquilidad con la debilidad. No era el hombre más ruidoso en una habitación. No dominé las conversaciones ni exigí atención. Prefería escuchar, observar y resolver problemas mientras otros discutían sobre ellos. Ese hábito me ayudó a construir una empresa de logística exitosa desde cero, pero también hizo que la gente me subestimara, especialmente la familia de mi esposa. Cuando me casé con Claire 14 años antes, realmente creía que estábamos construyendo una vida juntos. Al principio, éramos socios. Trabajamos muchas horas, compartimos sueños y celebramos cada pequeña victoria. Pero a medida que el negocio crecía, algo cambió. El éxito se convirtió en mi responsabilidad y en su derecho. Manejé los riesgos, la nómina, las noches sin dormir y la presión constante. Claire disfrutó de las recompensas, las vacaciones, las compras de lujo, los eventos sociales. Le encantaba presentar nuestra vida como si la hubiéramos construido por igual. Su familia fomentó esa ilusión. En las reuniones familiares, bromeaban diciendo que tenía suerte de que Claire se hubiera conformado conmigo. Cada vez que la empresa alcanzaba un hito, elogiaban sus instintos en lugar de mi trabajo. Sonreí y lo ignoré porque discutir nunca pareció valer la energía. Con el tiempo, darse por sentado se volvió normal. Me veían predecible, confiable, fácil de manipular. Lo que ninguno de ellos entendió fue que años de ser subestimado me habían enseñado algo valioso. Las personas revelan sus verdaderas intenciones cuando creen que ya has perdido. Mirando hacia atrás, la aventura no fue la primera traición. Fue simplemente el que se volvió imposible de ocultar. Durante años, hubo momentos más pequeños, pequeñas grietas que parecían inofensivas hasta que formaron un patrón. En las cenas, Claire me interrumpía a mitad de una historia, corrigiendo detalles que no necesitaban corrección. Los invitados se reían cortésmente mientras ella sonreía en su copa de vino. Siempre parecía juguetón desde afuera. Nunca me pareció juguetón. Cuando los clientes comerciales felicitaban el crecimiento de la empresa, Claire se refería casualmente a ella como nuestra empresa, a pesar de que no había trabajado allí en casi una década. Rara vez la desafiaba. The truth didn't need defending. Her family was worse. Her father often spoke to me in a tone usually reserved for employees. Her brother loved making jokes at my expense, then pretending they were harmless when nobody laughed. Every gathering seemed to include some reminder that I wasn't quite good enough for their daughter. What stayed with me most were the looks, the exchanged glances when I left the room, the sudden silence when I walked back in, the conversations that ended a second too quickly. Nothing dramatic, nothing I could point to as proof. Just enough to make me feel like an outsider inside my own marriage. And somewhere along the way, I noticed Claire had stopped defending me. Sometimes she even joined them. The realization arrived quietly. By the time I felt alone in a room full of family, I already was. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no screaming match, no shocking confession. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had returned to the office early from a client meeting after realizing I had left an important contract in my desk drawer. The building was unusually quiet. Most employees were at lunch. As I walked down the hallway toward my office, I heard Claire's voice coming from a conference room with the door slightly open. I wasn't trying to listen. Then I heard my name. I stopped. Inside, Claire was speaking with the executive she'd later claim was just a friend. They were discussing future plans, as if my role in both the marriage and the company had already ended. What caught my attention wasn't the affair. It was the confidence, the certainty. They were talking about company assets, client relationships, and even our children, as if ownership would simply transfer from me to them. At one point, the man laughed softly and asked, "Does Daniel suspect anything?" Claire smiled. "I know him," she said. "He'll fight for a while, then he'll give up." The room fell silent. So did I. For years, I had tolerated disrespect because I believed preserving peace mattered more than winning arguments. Standing outside that conference room, I realized something uncomfortable. The people closest to me weren't misunderstanding my kindness. They were exploiting it. That afternoon, I quietly walked away before they saw me. I never mentioned what I'd heard. Instead, I hired investigators, forensic accountants, and a new attorney. By the time Claire filed for divorce months later, she believed she was several moves ahead. The truth was far different. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. What happened next wasn't revenge in the way most people imagine it. There were no threats, traps, or emotional outbursts. There was preparation. For years, I had built businesses by managing risk. When a problem appeared, I didn't panic. I gathered information, verified facts, and planned several steps ahead. I approached my marriage the same way. The investigators documented Claire's relationship carefully and legally. The forensic accountants reviewed financial records from the previous 3 years. My attorney specialized in complex business divorces and had handled cases involving hidden assets, conflicts of interest, and corporate misconduct. What we discovered was revealing. Claire hadn't simply been having an affair. She had been sharing confidential business information with the executive she was seeing. Several of our competitors had suddenly gained access to opportunities that should have remained private. Individually, each incident looked innocent. Together, they formed a pattern. I didn't rush to use the information. Instead, I secured every contract, updated internal controls, documented ownership structures, and separated personal assets from business operations wherever legally appropriate. At home, I focused on my children. I attended every school event, saved every communication, and maintained detailed records of my involvement in their lives. Meanwhile, Claire grew more confident. The more certain she became of victory, the less careful she was. By the time the divorce proceedings began, she believed she held all the leverage. I knew exactly where every piece on the board stood, and I was content to let her make the next move. The payoff began the day I followed my father's advice. Give her everything. So I did. Inside the conference room, I agreed to terms that shocked everyone. Claire would receive the house. She would receive several luxury assets. I offered concessions so quickly that her attorney paused twice to confirm he had heard me correctly. Across the table, her family exchanged satisfied smiles. They thought I was surrendering. What they didn't understand was that none of those assets represented the true source of value. The house carried enormous maintenance costs and a mortgage that required substantial monthly payments. Several assets Claire demanded were depreciating investments that looked impressive on paper, but generated little income. The business was different. Months earlier, my legal team had completed a restructuring that protected the company's core operations and intellectual property. Claire's ownership claims were far weaker than she believed. Then came the disclosures, evidence of confidential information being shared outside. The company surfaced during related proceedings. Regulatory inquiries followed. Business partners began asking uncomfortable questions. The executive she had trusted distanced himself almost immediately. Within months, the relationship collapsed. I still remember seeing Claire outside another hearing. Her confidence was gone. The certainty that had carried her through the divorce had vanished. Meanwhile, the company continued growing. My children remained a constant part of my life. As consequence after consequence unfolded, I never celebrated publicly. I simply watched the truth do what anger never could. It spoke for itself. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was gradual. And because it unfolded slowly, it hurt far more than any dramatic confrontation ever could. Claire's family stopped laughing first. The same relatives who had celebrated outside the courthouse suddenly avoided discussing the divorce altogether. The confident predictions they'd made about my downfall quietly disappeared. Family gatherings became noticeably smaller. Invitations became selective. No one wanted to admit how wrong they had been. Professionally, the damage to Claire's reputation spread through whispers rather than headlines. Former friends became distant. Business contacts stopped returning calls. People who had once enjoyed standing beside success were nowhere to be found. When consequences arrived, what surprised me most was my own reaction. I expected satisfaction. Instead, I mostly felt relief. For years, I had measured my worth through other people's approval. I wanted respect from people who had already decided not to give it. The divorce forced me to confront that reality. My children noticed the change, too. I became calmer, more present, less concerned with proving myself. That's why this story matters. Not because someone lost, not because someone won, but because many people spend years shrinking themselves to keep peace with people who don't value them. The real cost isn't money, property, or reputation. It's the slow loss of your own self-respect and recovering that is worth more than anything that can be awarded in court. A few years have passed since that day in divorce court. The house is gone. The marriage is gone. Many of the relationships that once seemed important are gone too. Strangely, I don't miss any of them. What remains is far more valuable. My children and I built new traditions together. Weekend breakfast became road trips. School events became celebrations instead of time. I once spent defending myself now goes toward building memories with the people who genuinely matter. The business continues to grow, but it no longer defines me. Success feels different now. It's quieter, more personal, less about proving doubters wrong, and more about creating a life I can respect when nobody is watching. Occasionally, people ask whether I regret giving Claire so much during the divorce. I always give the same answer. No, because what looked like surrender was actually freedom. The anger eventually faded. The resentment faded too. What remained was a lesson I wish I had learned much earlier. Not every battle is won by holding on. Sometimes the greatest victory comes from letting go of what was already lost. I walked into that courthouse prepared to lose everything. Instead, I lost an illusion, and in its place I found something far stronger than revenge. I found peace, and no one could ever take that from me again.